Everybody, this session is going to be on postoperative arrhythmia after cardiopulmonary bypass, that is after open heart surgery or cardiac surgery. So this class is going to be for the final year students of both degree and diploma course, diploma perfusion course. So as my target audience is the final year students, so I wish they all have already observed, they all already knew it that arrhythmia after cardiac surgery is a very common complication. It is also a very most common cause of postoperative morbidity and mortality, as well as increased in hospital stay and increased cost of treatment. So for arrhythmia, the causes are mainly the injury during surgery, that may be surgical, the trauma, injury or trauma, that may be surgical, that is the incisions that are given on heart or by cannulations, by any type of accidental suture wide of any part of our conduction system, that is on either SA node or AV node or bundle branches. Anything can occur, anything may happen, except that other causes are hemodynamic stress that is caused by again extensive hemodynamic disarrangement or derangement, whatever you say. Next cause is drug induced arrhythmia, the inotropes, and other drugs. In fact, antiarrhythmic drugs can also induce arrhythmia themselves. So there are many causes of arrhythmia after open heart surgery. So, and as risk factors, we can say increased or elderly age is one of the most common risk factor which can induce arrhythmia after surgery. Structural heart disease and extracardiac comorbidities like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or a history of stroke. These are also very common risk factors. So next we will see what are the common type of arrhythmias after cardiac surgery. So very first we will see tachyarrhythmias. We all know that arrhythmia can be of two types, tachyarrhythmia and bradyarrhythmia. So first we will discuss about the tachyarrhythmias that commonly occurs after cardiac surgery. So first we will see the atrial tachyarrhythmias. So the most common arrhythmia that is seen after open heart surgery is atrial fibrillation. So atrial fibrillation is the commonest type of arrhythmia that is seen after open heart surgery, and it usually the peak incidence usually occurs at 2 to 3 postoperative days. So after 2 to 3 postoperative days, the incidence of atrial fibrillation, the occurrence of atrial fibrillation is at their peak according to the studies. There may be also atrial flutter as well as. So first we will discuss about the features of atrial fibrillation and flutter. I have not written it down here because I guess you already know it, and due to lack of space also I have not written down the features. So let's first discuss the features of atrial fibrillation. So obviously there will be absent P wave in atrial fibrillation and irregular ventricular rate. In atrial flutter we will see the typical flutter wave or sawtooth like wave in the baseline of ECG. So next we'll see the etiology. Etiology means the reason of the arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation and flutter. First is acute atrial changes, that is ischemia, trauma from cannulation, etc. what I have already discussed. Next is inflammation. Obviously inflammation is there, we all know. This is a very common adverse effect of our CPP circuit. Next is CPP and cross clamp time. Increased cardiopulmonary bypass time and increased cross clamp time is also a major determinant of occurrence of arrhythmia after cardiac surgery. Post op beta blocker withdrawal, again extracardiac comorbidities like COPD and cardiac reasons like RCA disease, right coronary arterial disease. Right coronary, we all know right coronary artery. From right coronary artery, the SA node is supplied. The SA nodal artery is arising from the right coronary artery. So if there is any disease in right coronary artery, that can also cause atrial fibrillation or flutter, and again accidental suture void on SA node. So treatment, the mainstay of treatment first and the foremost is we use amiodarone. Very rarely we use beta blockers because of hemodynamic and pulmonary intolerance. Next is atrial overdrive pacing, and the last is anticoagulant. So if atrial fibrillation lasts longer than 48 hours, then we will have to administer anticoagulant. Otherwise the chance of clot formation increases. So as an anticoagulant we generally use warfarin to maintain INR of 2 to 3. INR 2 to 3 is maintained to prevent clot formation. So what is the clinical effect of atrial fibrillation if we keep it untreated? Now it will cause hypotension and ischemia. How? It will decrease the diastolic filling, because in both cases of atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter, we all know that atrial kick will be absent. So the diastolic filling of ventricle will go down. So as well as the cardiac output will be go down, but the myocardial oxygen demand is increased. So there will be ischemia, and due to reduced cardiac output there will be hypotension. So next we will see the ventricular tachyarrhythmias. Next is ventricular tachyarrhythmias. So among ventricular tachyarrhythmias, most common is premature ventricular complex, that is ventricular ectopics. VD, that may be sustained or non-sustained, and VF, it is ventricular tachycardia, and VF is ventricular fibrillation. So the causes of ventricular tachyarrhythmias are most commonly electrolyte imbalance. Electrolyte imbalance along with metabolic derangements, which is the most common cause of premature ventricular complex. Others are altered hemodynamics, ischemia reperfusion injury, acute graft occlusion, acute venous graft occlusion, inotropes, and antiarrhythmic drugs. As I said earlier, antiarrhythmic drugs can also cause arrhythmia themselves, and as well as inotropes. So next is the treatment. So first strategy is to correct the reversible causes. Reversible causes like electrolyte imbalance. From ABG we can diagnose that electrolyte imbalance and metabolic derangements. Then we can correct them, which most commonly causes premature ventricular complexes. And other causes are pain, which pain, bleeding, that may be medical or surgical. They also can causes tachyarrhythmias. They usually cause ventricular tachycardia but sinus tachycardia. So we can give painkillers, we can treat the causes of bleeding, that will automatically reverse the sinus tachycardia. Next, antiarrhythmic drugs. Among antiarrhythmic drugs, first is and most commonly used is lidocaine for premature ventricular complex and hemodynamically stable sustained VT. That means patient is having sustained VT but the patient is hemodynamically stable. In those cases, lidocaine can be used at a dose of 2 to 3 milligram per kg in two individual doses in 10 to 5 minute gap, followed by infusion of 2 to 4 milligram per minute. Again, dose of lidocaine is 2 to 3 milligram per kg in two divided dose in 10 to 15 minute gap, followed by infusion of 2 to 4 milligram per minute. Next is the amiodarone. This is the first line of treatment for hemodynamically significant and sustained tachyarrhythmias, especially VT. So amiodarone is given first as a loading dose or bolus dose of 150 mg, which is given over 10 minutes, followed by infusion of 0.5 to 1 mg per minute. An additional dose of 150 mg bolus can also be given after first few hours of first bolus dose to treat recurrent significant VT or VF. So if patient is having recurrent and hemodynamically significant, hemodynamically compromising VT or VF, the bolus dose can be repeated, but in first 24 hours the total amount of amiodarone that is infused should not be more than 2000 mg. So total dose of amiodarone should be less than 2000 mg in first 24 hours. Second is procainamide. Now procainamide is not commonly used because it is nephrotoxic. For patient with renal insufficiency, we have to avoid it. But if we have to use procainamide, then for procainamide dosing is loading dose of 15 milligram per kg at a rate of 20 to maximum of 50 milligram per minute. 15 milligram per kg over 20 to 50 milligram per minute rate. This is the rate and this is the dose. So dose should be given at a rate of 20 to 50 milligram per minute. This is the loading dose, which is followed by infusion of 1 to 4 milligram per minute. Now during this loading dose, if QRS widens greater than 50%, then loading dose of procainamide have to be stopped. And if only hypotension arises due to the loading dose, then the rate of loading dose should be slowed down, should be slower. Next is ventricular pacing and electrical defibrillation and cardioversion. This is for VF. This is specially for VF and also for sustained VT that do not respond to antiarrhythmic drugs. That is, despite of using antiarrhythmic drugs, when VT will sustain, then you have to use the electrical defibrillation. And after all this medical management, if the ventricular tachyarrhythmia sustains and continuously compromising patient's hemodynamics, then we have to go on emergency cardiopulmonary bypass. Next we will see the bradyarrhythmias. So before starting VT, before starting bradyarrhythmias, some points to be mentioned, that is all this management that is discussed till now is are the acute managements. So for long term managements, that is patient is having long LV dysfunction, for long term LV dysfunction, in that case we have to implant ICD, that is internal cardioverter defibrillator. And one thing I have missed, that is the features of VT and VF and premature ventricular complexes. I guess you already know it, still I am just mentioning about the features. So premature ventricular complexes, the feature of premature ventricular complex is abnormally wide QRS complex, usually QRS duration greater than 0.12 second and not preceded by POF with discordant SDT segment. This is the features of premature ventricular beat, and the clinical significance is usually premature ventricular complex does not initiate or does not increase the risk of development of malignant cardiac arrhythmias, malignant tachyarrhythmias, but for short duration, for short term outcome, it can reduce the ventricular function. Next the features of VT and VF. In case of VT, you all know there will be a high ventricular rate with wide QRS complex, and in PF will be absent with irregular waves with varying morphology of QRS or TOF can be seen. So these are the features of the ventricular tachyarrhythmias. So now we will see the bradyarrhythmias that commonly occurs after cardiopulmonary bypass or after cardiac surgery, and details about them. So let's. The last type of arrhythmia, that is bradyarrhythmia after open heart surgery. So first are the risk factors. Among the risk factors, first is perivalvular calcification, second is older age, next one preoperative left bundle branch block, LV aneurysm, left main coronary artery stenosis, and longer CPP duration. So treatment is usually treated with temporary pacing, temporary epicardial pacing, After CABG, in cases for SNO dysfunction or AV conduction disturbance, permanent pacing can be used. In minimally invasive MVR, minimally invasive mitral valve replacement, where atrial septostomy is required, that is a hole through atrial septum and atrial septal defect, and ASD is made to operate the mitral valve in case of minimally invasive MVR. If after operation SNO dysfunction is present and persistent symptomatic bradycardia occurs, then permanent pacing should be used. Now, the frequent challenge with postoperative bradycardia is to determine the amount of time to allow the recovery of AV conduction defect or sinus node dysfunction after surgery before implanting the permanent pacemaker. So the main challenge is how much time that should be allowed for that should be allowed for recovery of SNO dysfunction or AV conduction defect before the permanent pacemaker is the option of permanent pacemaker is done or permanent pacemaker is planted in patient. So this time phase, this to determine the time that should be allowed for SNO and AV conduction system recovery is a very much challenging situation. Usually with long term patients with sinus node dysfunction usually recovers, and studies have shown that only 30 to 40% of patients with sinus node dysfunction after long term, only 30 to 40% patient remains pacemaker dependent, whereas patients with AV conduction defect, this chance of recovery is less, and patient with complete heart block, with patient with CHB, the patients almost in long term also almost 65 to 100% of patient remains pacemaker dependent. So again, the main challenge for treating bradycardia after open heart surgery is to determine the time period that should be allowed to recover, that should be allowed for recovery of SNO dysfunction or AV conduction disturbance before placing permanent pacemaker. And it is seen that with time in long term outcome, the patient, those who had SNO dysfunction, among them only 30 to 40% of patient remains pacemaker dependent, whereas patient who had previously AV conduction defect, the rate of recovery is less, and patient with complete heart block, the rate of recovery is more or less and almost nil. 65 to 100% of patient, up to 100% of patient can be pacemaker dependent even after long term. Next is in case of cardiac transplantation, that is heart transplantation. The requirement of permanent pacing is when SNO dysfunction is there, and SNO dysfunction is common in case of transplantation, whereas AV block is less common, but in both the cases permanent pacemaker is needed. Permanent pacemaker is less needed after bicable compared to biatrial transplant anastomosis. Bradycardia from graft rejection also needs pacemakers. Chronotropic medications can be used. Chronotropic medications like theophylline or aminophylline have been used for sinus bradycardia after heart transplantation to improve the SNO dysfunction or high grade AV block, and it has been demonstrated that they can decrease the need for permanent pacemaker. Now the risk factors for the patients who require heart transplantation are older donor age, longer donor ischemia time, and length of cross clamp, that is more the length of cross clamp time, more the chance of need for permanent pacemaker. So this is all about the common arrhythmias after CPB. So I have tried my best to make you understand, and I guess the session was understandable for you. Now I am ending this session here. So thank you, goodbye, and stay happy.